Hey everyone, welcome to Embergen Essentials Crash Course 2026. 5 parts, easy to follow, right from the ground up. Theory is, within 10 minutes you'll start to work out how to put things together, and within an hour you'll be rendering stuff out to show your mum. Banging. Now if you want the project files for any of these tutorials, links to those are going to be in the description of this video down below. And if you feel like supporting this channel, please hit like and subscribe. Now if you happen to be a filmmaker or a compositor who just wants access to some decent pre-rendered, pre-keyed effects, then I'd casually invite you to go and check out my website and also my Patreon, and there is links to those down below as well. So, where do you get started with Embergen then? Get started with the home screen, and that's what shows up when you first open the app. Now really helpfully, there's loads and loads of links to tutorials that are hosted on YouTube. There's a bunch for Embergen at the top, but go further down, there's a load for Embergen, even way back as well. Along the left hand side, you've got links to start a new project, open an existing project. There's one for all these presets here. These presets are really useful because you can open up the project and look at how it was actually built. Really useful. And we're going to do that with this default file here. We're going to open this one up and I'm going to give you a tour around the interface. All right, so we've got our preset open in Embergen. It's just a default file. You'll notice that it starts playing right away. None of this is rendered. This is all being thought up in real time by the GPU on your computer. Your first instinct is probably just to start clicking on stuff and start moving things around. And you can do that really easily. So in this top left section, this is the viewport. Think of this as like your cameraman for your project. You can hold in the left mouse button. You can drag around and that rotates you around your simulation. You can hold in the middle mouse button, so your mouse wheel. That'll allow you to pan around. You can zoom in and out by rolling the mouse wheel up and down. And one that took me ages to really pick up is if you hold in the right mouse button and use WASD, you can kind of walk around a bit like you would in a first-person shooter on PC. And, there's some controls here for moving objects around your scene. We don't really have objects in the scene at the moment. We've got this shape here, and we could rotate it. It would do nothing. It's a sphere. We could scale it in size, so we could do a bit of this. And obviously you can move it around as well on different axes. But 9 times out of 10, I would find I perform those actions over in the properties panel down here, and we'll get to that in a minute. So we've got our fire, but what's it made of? How are we generating it? All of that happens over here in the node graph. And this node graph, you can think of it's kind of like a factory. Stuff comes in at the left-hand side, it goes through the system, and it comes out at the other end. Your end product is going to be a render of some sort, whether that's a 3D VDB or a 2D sort of plate render. But everything it comes from is over on this side. And at times, these node graphs, they can look hideously complex, but once you start to understand the language that Embergen's talking, it's actually pretty simple. Things are always kind of built the same way. A couple of quick things that might be useful in this view. If you can double click on any of these connections, we call them noodles. Double clicking one separates it, just removes it. See how our fire shape just suddenly stopped working there? If I hook that back up, it should just spring back into action. Another thing we can do is select a bunch of nodes and then just hit C. That'll create a comment. So you could group these guys as ball with fire. And then you get a container that you can drag all of these nodes around in. It's a nice way to organize your project as you work. So in other videos further down the line, we'll really dig into what each of these nodes actually does. But this series of tutorials is really about just getting you up and running. So if these nodes tell Embergen what to make by building your node graph, then clicking on those nodes and getting the properties for those nodes, that tells Embergen exactly how to make it. So these are the really fine-grained details about exactly how you want this thing to work. Get comfy because 90% of the things you click on in Embergen, they're going to be down in this lower right part. And just to give you a real quick tour of how this works, we won't go into actually building a simulation yet. We're just looking at the interface and how it works. Let's go with our volume emitter here. You can resize these panes around as much as you want. Let's have a look along the top here. So this is our volume emitter, and this is all the properties of that volume emitter. So these tabs at the top, they aren't separate pages. They're actually just links that take you further down this one page. So nothing's hidden from you in Embergen. It's all there already. These links just take you to the relevant part. And then we've got 3 different kinds of controls here. So we've got these sliders, where you can see that we can move this all the way up to the top and all the way back down. Let's find one that influences what's happening on screen. So we've got emission. We've got let's go with the smoke rate. So currently at 0, we can't see any smoke in our simulation. If we drag this up, smoke starts to appear. Drag it all the way up, it will pretty much just be smoke. Now notice how we get all the way up to the end and it tops out at 1500. But that's like a glass ceiling, you can break that. you can just select the text and type in 3333. And then that will set a new ceiling. And you can drag backwards from there. So if you want to go really, really crazy with the value for whatever, you can do that. You just type in the number. And if you've been playing around with that and you want to reset it, you can click on this reset button here. But also this thing appeared when we changed the value of the smoke rate to 3333. If we click on that, we can just reset this and reset everything back to how it was. So that's your sliders. Drop downs are just drop downs. They're just going to select from a preset list of things. So we've got sliders, but there's 3 working together here, and these are coordinates of where something is in the scene. As I mentioned earlier, you obviously can move these things around, and these values change with it. But it also works the other way. You can start changing these in the properties panel, and the thing will move around. And then the most important one that you're really going to use are these overrides here. These symbols to the left of every property indicate that it can be animated either by keyframes or by another node. So for instance, if we look at our fuel rate and mouse over, no override means it's just going to be at a static value all the way through. A timeline override is setting a keyframe. You can have frame 0, it could be 0, and then frame 100, it could be 50, and it would go up over time. But the pin override is where it gets really, really interesting. So if we just click through, it gives us these different states. So nothing, keyframe, and a pin override. So now we've got a new input on our volume emitter, and that's explicitly for the fuel rate. And we can find any one of these operators here, say oscillator, and we're going to tell an oscillation to drive that fuel rate up and down. Now what's neat about this is there's also properties in this panel. This node's properties can also be animated by other drivers. And when we're working with keyframes, you obviously want to be able to see what you're doing. And that's where our timeline comes in, this bottom left part. Let's set a couple of keyframes. So there's one for frame 0 there. We're going to go up to frame 120. I'm just going to pull a couple of these values around. And that's where our object's going to be at that time. Nice. Super basic, but that's how keyframes work. Now then, another thing that some people kind of complain about with Embergen to begin with, but it's just because other software doesn't work this way. If we let this play for a second, and then we pause it with the spacebar, now you would expect in other software, if you drag the playhead backwards, that it would play the simulation backwards, but Embergen doesn't work that way. If we drag it backwards, it's just locked as it is. So Embergen is doing everything on the fly on your GPU. For us to view this backwards, it would have to have already been simulated and cached. But it's not, because it's all done on the fly. So that's why you can't play these things backwards. Now, thankfully, by its nature, a lot of the things that you build in Embergen are only a few seconds long. You're not going to be making like 4-minute long whole sequences. That would be a nightmare to work with. But for things like small fires, explosions, smoke, magic dust effects, stuff like that, it's over within a few seconds. So you don't really need to drag backwards and forwards and get to a certain point in the animation. If at any point you need to go back to the beginning, just hit R on the keyboard. It takes you right back. It just resets the animation back to frame 0. So you survived the UI tour. It's actually not that scary. Now, if you're coming from, say, After Effects, something like that, and you've never used a node-based system before, it can be a little bit scary to look at. But once you start to speak its language and you start to understand it, it's incredibly powerful to work with, because you're not just working in stacks of layers. So a couple of little notes as we wrap this video up and start moving into the really interesting stuff and building things. Help is everywhere in this interface, really. Most prevalently, bottom edge of the screen. If you mouse over anything, you tend to get loads of little hints as to what can be done, what the keyboard shortcuts might be. And that's really, really useful. Like right here, I already know that I can hit C to create a comment, just like before. And secondly, if you are just trying out the trial, you probably won't have any need of it. But if you go back over to the home screen, if you go on to be like a paid subscriber and you like the software and you want to support the company, you'd use your user login over here to handle your licensing needs and stuff like that. If you ever get any problems with that, head over into the Discord and just ask one of the devs, and they'll sort you out pretty quickly. They're really good at that. In fact, anyone learning this should go into the Discord. There's hundreds and hundreds of artists who all share their work, share their workflows, and they're really, really interesting people to learn from. All right, so that was a quick 10-minute tour of the interface, nothing too heavy. The next video, we're going to actually start sort of patching some nodes together and really building some stuff. So I'll catch you in the next video.